minds that plot destruction, sorcerer of death's construction, in the fields of bodies burning, as the war machine keeps turning.
So the other day a video popped up in my feed and I watched it, and it was all about the grotesque corruption that's being exposed in Ukraine. So as we all probably know by now, that country was utterly, almost hopelessly compromised before the Russian invasion even happened. But the invasion has really just made it more obvious. So now, unless you're willfully blind, which so many sadly are, you can see the vastness of the corruption going on there and kind of how it's all linked. Perhaps no better evidence of this is the news from last month that reported that the CEO of BlackRock has been having personal meetings for months now with the president of Ukraine, and they've been brokering this sort of shady backroom deal that'll lock in BlackRock as the main financier for the reconstruction of Ukraine. And this is happening before the war has even been won. And so BlackRock, of course, is big finance. They're one of the many corporate appendages of the global Jewish banking cartel. And what's even more repugnant and corrupt about all of this is that a major part of BlackRock's investment portfolio is in weapons manufacturing. So essentially this is what's happening. Our compromised government is using a fake mandate of approval to steal our money. They transfer it to a foreign government, which receives the money with the stipulation that it must spend the money on weapons made by a designated multinational firm that's based in the U.S. The foreign government transfers the money to the designated U.S.-based firm. The designated firm then sends the weapons that they manufactured to the foreign government. The war ensues and destroys the country's infrastructure. Then big finance rolls in after everything is said and done and everything's destroyed and loans the foreign government money for reconstruction that big finance made by investing in the firm that manufactured and sold the weapons that destroyed everything. The foreign government then taxes its own people and receives foreign aid, basically our money, so they can pay back big finance. So it's this big circle of corruption, and it's the same thing that's been happening with us aiding Israel for years. And in the meantime, Ukraine is the debt slave of the banking elite, and so they must obey accordingly with their agenda for post-war Ukraine. And of course, there are kickbacks and slush funds throughout this process to enrich all of the corrupt politicians and oligarchs that are involved. So what you basically have here is our money being used to push this agenda through a war profiteering machine. We basically finance our own demise, and all of these elites gain all this power and money in the meantime. And as we all know from history, there's really nothing new about what's happening in Ukraine. Ukraine is just the latest example, really. The multiplex of power that's at work here is plain as day. They take our wealth in a seemingly legitimate way. They distribute it amongst their own in a seemingly legitimate way. They use it to perpetuate their agenda in a seemingly legitimate way. And then the people coordinating this scam profit from the entire process in a seemingly legitimate way, and the entire cycle continues, but none of it is legitimate. And this is what they do for all kinds of things, not just their war agenda. They did the same thing with COVID and the vaccines and all that. They took our money, they distributed it to other elites, they used the money to create a population control virus, which gave them seemingly legitimate reason to perpetuate their other agendas. They profited immensely, and we bear the full burden, and the cycle continues over and over again. They're doing the same thing with immigration, especially in places like the UK. I watched a Morgoth's Review video the other day where he exposed that the UK government was using British tax dollars to fund this corporation named Serco, and that company was incentivizing landlords in northern England to basically kick out native English tenants and replace them with these invading migrants. So it was basically a full public-private partnership that uses British people's own money to facilitate their replacement in their own indigenous homeland. And so again, the white man suffers while the elite and their new slave population benefits. And of course, the elite have an army of propagandists working tirelessly to cover their tracks and vilify and gaslight anybody who notices the evil nature of all of this. And in this environment where these propagandists feel untouchable, they become so bold that they gloat and expose their methodology and agenda for all to see. Case in point, their propagandists begin writing things like this, where the propagandist frames Ukraine as representative of virtuous Jewry, while really in this case Jewishness is just put in as a proxy for Western liberal leftism in the mind of the propagandists. The propagandist then contrasts Russia as representative of Nazism, or basically evil anti-Jewry, which is a proxy really for anything that isn't globo homo in the mind of the propagandist. How subtle, right? I mean, of course, it's not really as simple as Ukraine is Jewish and Russia is fash, but this is how they want us to see it. Ukraine's defense minister was interviewed a few months back and openly admitted on camera that Ukraine is basically serving as a lab experiment for elite interests. So the global elite get to steal white people's money, use it to buy and test new weaponry, rake in the profits, and perpetuate their agenda all at the same time. And the added bonus, of course, is that a bunch of white people die in the process. And once Ukraine is fully brought into this kind of globo homo fold, it can serve as an overland route then for migrants into mainland Europe, which eliminates the Turkish problem that they're currently dealing with. The hordes of Ukrainians fleeing the war are already being infiltrated by people trying to invade Europe from Africa and the Middle East. So the video I watched, it did well to expose the corruption, but it also left quite a bit out. The creator pointed the finger at NATO and at the West and at the banks and corporations, but he failed to see the forest for the trees. He failed to realize that a certain group that makes up only 0.2% of the world's population and of Ukraine's population is the vanguard of this multiplex of corruption and the whole agenda that it wants to perpetuate. And you can see this as all three major players in BlackRock, including Larry Fink, the CEO who met with Zelensky. They're all of a certain ethno-religious group. Zelensky is also a member of that group. Zelensky's defense minister, the guy who bragged about Ukraine being a place for the elite to test weapons, he's also a member of this tribe. The man pictured to the left here is the chairman of the Ukrainian parliament. And he's the man who would step up, in the case that President Zelensky was killed or something. He's also a member of this tribe. The man to Zelensky's right here, he's the prime minister of Ukraine, and he is a member of this tribe. Now remember, only 0.2% of the population in Ukraine are members of this tribe, and yet members of this tribe occupy the top 3 political positions in the country. The propagandist who wrote this article, he's also a member of this tribe. On his Wikipedia page, 3 people were mentioned as being the greatest influencer of this journalist, this propagandist, right? All 3 of those people are members of this tribe. This online magazine right here, it's supposed to focus on news and culture. It's owned by a member of this tribe. So the more layers you peel back, the more the truth is exposed, and the harder it is for anyone to deny the implications of this overrepresentation in the context of the Russo-Ukrainian war. I mean, look at this bullshit. I'm a combat veteran, and I can tell you that neither one of these people here have fought a day of combat in their life. Their uniforms look brand new. They're clean, their hands look soft, their beards are manicured, and we're supposed to believe that these two are on the front lines of this conflict? This is pure propaganda. It's this desperate appeal to convince the philo-Semitic Goy mass that, look, we're the real Jewish ones, support us. I mean, are we to believe that there's no connection whatsoever between all of these people and what they're doing and their Jewishness? I mean, that's what they hope. And all of this only gets worse and more crazy when you realize that Russia, too, is dominated by oligarchs that are members of this tribe. And Putin, with all of his bravado, he's really their bitch, not the other way around. The oligarchs are largely in control of Russia and its foreign policy decisions. So it's highly unlikely that Putin moved on Ukraine without their permission. And why wouldn't they let him? I mean, wars are profitable and create these power vacuums that they can fill. And if Goyim die in the process, it's a win-win for them. Their propaganda and influence just seethes out of the Russian state outlets and the Western mainstream outlets, including the Western mainstream conservatives, with their whole, Ukraine is full of Nazis and Azov battalion shtick. Both sides are accusing the others of being controlled by Nazis, but really, neither one of them are controlled by Nazis. They're both controlled by the tribe. This whole Ukraine Shanda is really just another disgraceful money and power grab, with the added benefit of plenty of Goyim getting chewed up in the war machine.